This week on What in the World is Going On, IDF preparing for new campaign in Gaza, says IDF top brass. That's the headline. Stay tuned, friends. We at the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry reported that on April 4th, informing you that IDF spokesperson Lieutenant General Ran Kochav said the army was prepared for any scenario, including attacks from Lebanon and Syria in the north, as well as from the Gaza Strip. And in the wake of 3 recent deadly terror attacks across the country, the Israeli security establishment has taken steps to increase protection and preparedness. We further went on to report to you that speaking to Ynet on Sunday the 3rd, General Kochav said that despite the relative quiet on the Gaza border over several months, the IDF is prepared for any challenge, including a repeat of the events of last May during Ramadan when Israel launched Operation Guardian of the Walls in response to Hamas's firing of rockets at Israel that reached north of Tel Aviv. I'm sure, friends, by now most of you have heard of the recent wave of terror attacks in Israel, 3 within a week and a half to be exact, leaving 11 people killed and several others wounded. 2 of the attacks happened in Beersheba and Hadera and were committed by Arab Israelis affiliated with ISIS. In Beersheba, the terrorist rammed his car into a cyclist and then stabbed 5 Israelis, killing 4 of them. Now, while most normal people would condemn this horrific act of terror, in Gaza, well, things are different because terror groups filled with praise for the attack handed out candy to residents. Friends, that's just disturbing and disgusting to say the least. And then, just over the weekend, 2 days into Ramadan, at least 10 Palestinians were arrested in a second night of clashes with Israeli police forces. They were throwing rocks, bottles, iron rods at the police, and some of them even getting into fistfights with the police. And then on the next morning, on Sunday, and rightfully so, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, he visited the Damascus Gate where it happened to evaluate the situation, in which Hamas warned that the visit was a dangerous escalation and a provocation during Ramadan. Friends, all I can say is we need to be praying for Israel because this is what they seem to be having to deal with on a regular basis. And so once again, because of what's happening, Israel is preparing for a new campaign in Gaza should Hamas attack Israel with their rockets once again. Of course, if you remember last year, Hamas launched over 4,500 rockets into Israel. And really since 2005, when Israel handed Gaza over to the Palestinians, were they thankful? What was the result? Well, the result was that to date, since 2005, over 21,000 rockets and mortars have been launched into Israel from Gaza. And so as a result of what happened last spring, Israel launched what was called Operation Guardian of the Walls, which targeted Hamas terror behind the scenes. Hamas was launching their rockets from in and around mosques and schools and hospitals and residential buildings. And while Israel does what it can to limit civilian casualties, the blame isn't on Israel. It's on Hamas. That's where the blame is. But if that happens again this year, as it did last year, my question is this: will the world condemn Israel again for using disproportionate force? Friends, that's what they did. They blamed Israel last year for using disproportionate force. I wonder if Israel didn't have the Iron Dome that took out the majority of the 4,500 rockets, would they still condemn Israel? Well, I'm not sure. But they condemned Israel. And will they do that again? Will they side with a terrorist organization, Hamas, who, by the way, their charter is the destruction of Israel? Is the world going to side with Hamas? Or are they going to side with the only free democratic country in the Middle East, Israel? Well, I pray that they do side with Israel. But I'm not so sure anymore because common sense these days seems to be, well, not so common. This year, I would really covet your prayers as I'm off to Israel with some pastors from Canada on May 23rd to the 30th, and we are going to be visiting some of these troublesome hotspots, including along the Gaza border. There we will be briefed as to what the current situation is, and so we just ask for your prayers, friends. But through all of this, Through all of what I've just shared and what's happening with Israel, I am reminded that the God of Israel is the one who protects her. I think of Psalm 121 verse 4 says, "Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." And Psalm 125 verse 2, "As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forever." You know, friends, the Jewish people are a special treasure to God. They are the apple of his eye. And if you come against his people, is what you are doing is really you are poking the God of this universe right in his eye. And all I have to say is, woe unto you. Now, as I read these verses here, that doesn't mean that there will be no wars or conflict. Jesus said that Jerusalem would be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled when Israel's Messiah returns. In which at that time, friends, I want to remind you that Hamas will be finished, will be no longer, because Jesus, the real guardian of the walls, will be here. And with that, and until next time, this has been What in the World is Going On with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. Have a good night, everyone.